Hi, everybody, and welcome back. So, today we're doing, I guess we could call it take two with Lori Gold. So, Lori came on, we just were talking about this maybe about a year ago to chat about her novel, Romantic Friction, which came out in 2025. And I absolutely, there she is. If you're watching this on YouTube on the video, it's such a great cover.
Thank you.
I loved it then. I love it now. It's just, I love it. I love it. And now you have another one coming out, Kiss,
I'll
Mary
do the same
Kill.
thing.
Let's do it again. Let's do it again. These are I all right. I just got a question that I didn't even have before about cover design. But Kiss, Mary Kill comes out, is it the 20th?
April 7th.
7th, the 7th. That's right, because this will go on the 8th. So I'm holding it until launch week. But
Great.
um, so let me ask you this, because what I would love to do, if you're okay with it, is focus a little bit on the publishing journey
Sure.
as opposed to maybe the writing journey, which I think we talked a lot about the first time around. And one of the
Yes.
main reasons I'd love to chat about this with you, Lori, is that a couple of days ago, I put a post on Instagram and I'm self-published, which I'm very transparent about, but with my numbers
Right.
from my most recent book. So
Okay.
as transparent as I can possibly be.
Yeah.
It was a screenshot of my Amazon sales of that book since it came out. And then, um, so the number, the earnings, the whole thing. And then it was like, now we have to subtract out the editing cost and the
Right.
publishing cost. And for traditionally published authors, in some cases, they are subtracting from their advance
Yeah.
extra PR that they may
Right.
be hiring or extra editing help, sometimes even book coaching,
Yeah.
so that people can get a more clear uh, uh, set of expectations and a more
Yeah.
clear vision of what this really looks like, with the caveat that it's different for everybody.
Sure.
So everybody's context is different. Some people's advances are higher. Some people don't have advances, all
Right.
these things. And it led me to think I wanted to talk to you about that today, just in terms of your own experience and maybe what you did expect and didn't expect. So after I saw the Kiss, Mary Kill cover,
Yeah.
first of all, was that the original title?
It was close. Kiss Mary Kill is the
Okay.
clean version of the title, so I think we all
Oh,
can probably guess what the original title
gotcha.
was.
Okay. Okay.
That we did have some discussions in-house of if we were gonna try to keep it, and, there would be, like, F and asterisks and things,
Uh-huh.
and, like, try to and then we ultimately wound up with the clean version of the title
Okay.
for making sure it was going to be open for everybody to stock, though we wouldn't have
Yeah.
any issues in libraries or anything like that. So a very business decision. Even to the practical side, as we were talking about, like the practical side of publishing, um, if it were, say, asterisk things, how do
Yeah.
you type that in if you want to search for it on Bookshop or on Amazon? Like, what do you type in, right? And so, like, we
Yeah.
did have some discussions because a lot of people know it as the non-clean version, but we settled on the clean version,
Okay.
which I am glad that we settled on.
Well, and look, there is no right or wrong. I think a lot of people,
Yeah,
when they're thinking about clean versus non-clean, especially on a title, it does the non-clean version. Um, is it gratuitous, or
right,
is it truly necessary?
right.
Another thing, this doesn't necessarily affect traditionally published authors quite as much, but if you're indie published and you have certain swear words, you can use damn and you can use hell on your title and still be able to
Okay.
advertise. But
Oh, interesting.
if you
Yeah,
use any of the other four-letter expletives or more than 4 letters, you cannot run ads on Meta
yes.
or on Amazon. So it
It's the same
creates.
for traditionally
Yeah,
published. That was
sure,
part of the
of
discussion. Yeah,
course.
yeah,
When I said it's different, what I meant is that lots of times with traditional publishing, they're not running Amazon
right.
ads,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
a whole slew of reasons. But,
yeah,
uh, what's interesting, though, when you say, "How do people search for it?"
yeah.
is there's a software that I use called Publisher Rocket that I swear by to help identify keywords and categories and
Okay.
things like that for books. And so I can see through that software what the search relevant, like what the volume is and the competition is for certain keywords. And when
Right.
you put
Okay.
in, you can see what people are actually searching. And they do
Yeah,
put those asterisks in, and
yeah,
sometimes they don't. But
right.
yeah, it's like, what
It
would
makes
they
something that it doesn't have to be that hard, and what is the benefit? Like, what are you losing
there you go.
if you don't use it? What are you gaining if you do? And, like, that's part of the discussion. Yeah.
Correct. It makes me think of All Fours, the novel
Yes.
All Fours, like, that could have had a very explicit, because the content is pretty explicit.
Right.
So, I think it could have had an explicit title. I don't know why that wasn't, but
Right. Yeah.
anyway. So with Kiss, Marry, Kill, I also saw that this was inspired by a TV show.
It was. That's
What
where the
what was
spark.
it though?
So this was back in the idea came to me from this TV show back in 2020. So pre-COVID or just around that time.
Yeah.
It was this teen show. I think it only ran for a season called The Society, and I did have to look it up because I couldn't remember what
Okay.
the title was. But it was kind of this somewhat speculative story about a bunch of teens stuck in their town, and
Okay.
everybody else is gone. All the parents are gone, any younger siblings are gone. Everybody's gone except for this set of I forget how many teens. And
Okay.
if they tried to leave the town and cross the town borders, there was nothing there. It disappeared. It just brought them back into their town. So they were stuck.
Okay.
They couldn't leave.
Wild.
And the bunch of the young women were playing the game Kiss, Marry, Kill to pass the time, and they were
Okay.
playing it with the guys who were there and stuck with them in this kind of like speculative whatever this environment. And so they played it on the show, and immediately I thought that's a cool hook for a book. The idea
Mhm.
of us doing something about the game Kiss, Marry, Kill.
Yeah.
And immediately I'm thinking like, well, how do I spin it to push it more high concept? Because that's where I come from, my fiction. I want things to be unexpected. So
Okay.
that's where I kind of spun the idea that the women play the game but play it a different way. They change the rules. So instead of picking three people and one person chooses who would I kiss, who would I marry, who would I kill out of that group of people, we change it up. So the first woman, who would you kiss out of everybody here? Who would you marry out of everybody here? Who would you kill out of everybody here? So we spin the rules, they play it differently, and then to push it even further in the high concept, they're going to wake
Mhm.
up in an alternate universe where they each
Right.
have done that thing. So all of those pieces came to me pretty quickly while watching that show.
Okay. And
Yeah.
it's also been likened a little bit to sliding doors, just this
Yes.
idea of like, what if this, or certainly, well, Freaky Friday, or even
Yeah.
13 going on 30. It's fun to play with. What
Yeah.
if we switched places, not literally, but as people or in the timeline?
Right.
Um, yeah. So how I said I wasn't gonna ask you much about the writing process, but I have a personal question.
Yeah.
How, complicated or not was it for you? Was there a piece of writing that once you got the idea that felt a little more complicated than you expected?
Oh my God, the whole thing was more
Okay.
complicated than I expected.
Really?
It is
Okay.
my most complicated book narratively. It's three point of views, which I have done before and I do enjoy doing, but it's three point of views. It's multiple timelines. It incorporates flashbacks and a little bit of mystery around
Okay.
a murder or potential murder, and plus some little mystery around what happens in these women found an app, a health and wellness app that's about to go public on Wall Street, and there's something going on with the company. And so there's like a little bit of a mystery with that as well. It's a lot of layers and a lot of things going on. And so it was a big challenge narratively for me to figure out how do I tell this story in a way that is going to be intriguing for a reader and not overly complicated. And it was hard. And this went through more revisions than any other book I've written. It sat for periods. I wrote it in
Mhm.
2021. It sat for a little while, I went back to it, it sat for a little while, I went back to it, like, it was a continuous process of trying to hone it and polish it, and it's the longest book I've been with this book longer than any other book I've
So
written.
you wrote this one as a draft anyway before Romantic Friction?
It was actually, what I thought at that time was a final draft before Romantic Fiction, and we
Okay.
decided when we were my agent and I had them both done, and we put Romantic Fiction out first, just because it was more timely. But the
Okay.
editor knew when they it was a two-book deal, so they knew that this was gonna be the second book, and she had read the synopsis for it, so yeah.
So it's with HarperCollins, and
Yes.
this is not, meant to I would never ask someone, just for the record, "What did you hate about working with so and so?" I would not
Yeah.
ever put anyone on that, because that's
Yeah.
not even the energy that I wanna put out into the world. What
Right.
I'm curious about is What about the publishing process? And if we even want to think back to romantic friction, were you expecting maybe that then you realized in your experience, just in your experience, you were like, wow, this is not my experience. I thought it would
Yeah.
be, but it is not.
I don't know if I have something that I can pull on because this is my
Okay.
seventh book.
Yeah.
And all of my books have been with traditional publishers and bigger traditional publishers, Penguin Random House and Macmillan. So I had a sense of what to expect and
Okay.
how the process goes. I will say maybe one thing not so much unexpected, but a change from when I
Yeah.
started. My first book that I think I sold it in 2013. It came out in 2015. It had a little over 2
Mhm.
years before it came out. What was
Okay.
different about these 2 books, they were both in production and out in less than a year of the time my editor started working on it. I
Wow.
mean, the timeline of and that's not unusual anymore. I have other friends who are in that same boat, and it's a lot for everybody. I think it's a lot
Yeah.
for the editors. I think it's a lot for the sales and marketing team. It's certainly a lot for the author. In some ways, I feel very fortunate that Kiss, Mary Kill had been written and finished because you do so much marketing for a book on your own. We could talk about that as part of what we're talking
Sure.
about today. And then if you have another book coming out the next year, how do you write another book? Edit another book, revise it, and you're still promoting the first book. I wouldn't have been able to have this second book out a year
That would
later
have
if
been
it hadn't been complete and done to a high level. Because again, I said I'd polished it many, many times over these years that it's been kind of sitting. That timeline that is condensed is different than when it was, and I guess that would be the thing that
yeah.
surprised me.
I wanna ask you about that. With this sort of shortened timeline, one of the things that when I used to talk to people about, well, what does traditional publishing look like? And people were trying to decide, do I want to go try to get an agent and get a traditional deal, or do I want to go another route?
Right.
Um, some of the questions that I would ask were, what are your expectations around advances, around timeline? And there was something else I can't remember right now. But because usually they were wildly inaccurate. So
Right.
there was this thought of a six-figure advance, it's gonna
Yeah.
come to me all at once, there are no taxes coming out, there's no agent fees coming out.
Yeah.
Oh, marketing is the third one. The
Right.
second one, the misconception was that it's gonna be quick.
Right.
Like, we're gonna sign, and then it's gonna be out, and at
Yeah.
that time, it was the average was more like 2 to 3 years. I think now the average is kind of more in the like 15 to 30 months range. I mean,
Yeah.
there's before and after that, but and then the third one was marketing. It was this, well, I want to go with a traditional house because they're going to do all my marketing and they're going to sell all my books and they're going to get it in the airports and it's going to be like roll out the red carpet. And
Yeah.
and I said, well, that's not my understanding of anyone's experience really, unless you're
Yeah.
at the Colleen Hoover level or
Right.
something of that nature. But when it comes to the timeline, Lori, what do you think? Do you think that's and I hate to use the word good or bad, but does it serve people better to have a show? Do you think it's a result of like, what do you think it's a result of that
Yeah.
some of those timelines are compressing?
I think we're still publishing a lot of books. I don't know if we're
Mm.
publishing more books than we did when I first started 10 years ago, but there are a lot of books. And I think partly where publishers are slotting them to come out on a regular rotation. And I think this idea of an author having a book a year is helpful. I mean, and it is helpful for the publisher, but also for the author. Like you might
Mhm.
discover romantic fiction because you found Kiss, Mary, Kill. And that means romantic fiction is still new. It's not a 5-year-old book. That does have value. I will say that can be a positive that people can go to another of your books right away. So certainly that is a piece of it. I also think that we probably are doing less overall in all of the buckets you just mentioned. So you're able to do something in a shorter timeline because you used to
Yeah.
have the marketing and publicity call with your team. For me, at least I'll say from my experiences, 10 months out before publication.
Mhm.
Now it's 4 months out, 5 months out.
Yeah.
And the
Uh-huh.
unfortunate side of that for people who want the truth about business is many publications their doors are closed to being able to even get you in. They might love it, but you want to get in Elle or you want to get in Vogue. Those a June, July release is, done by like January, like it's locked. You
Yeah.
can't get in there as a book recommendation anymore. So the closer we start publicity work closer to publication, the less options readers have to discover your book.
That's
And
a
that is a
really, really
downside
good
to
point.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm curious on the editing. The
Yeah.
other thing I'm hearing is that a lot of, not all certainly, but a lot of traditionally published authors are working with developmental editors before
Yeah.
they even
Right.
submit their manuscripts to their editor at their cost.
Right.
So that they get a higher, because I think the last thing people want is for it to be a rush job on their
Yeah.
editing and for that
Yeah.
to affect the
Yeah.
reception to the book.
And I think there's also value to it because everything's more competitive than it was. It's more competitive to get an agent. It's always been competitive, but it's even more competitive to get an agent. It's even more competitive to get an editor. So the work has to be at a higher level. So I think it feeds itself, right? If I, as an author, am making sure my book is as great as it can be, it
Mhm.
means maybe there's less work for the editor to do. And that would be, ultimately allow things to go faster. And I do think that's happening. I think agents are looking for more polished work. Generally, this is a generalization,
Mhm.
obviously.
Of
But I
course.
think they're looking for more polished works. And I think editors are looking for more polished work. And, whether
Yeah.
who came first, chicken or the egg kind of thing. Do I have less time
Right.
to edit? So I need the higher quality one, or there's more to choose from. So why not go with the higher quality one?
Well, and I could imagine, I mean, being an editor, right? I what I often tell authors with whom I'm working is my belief is an editor can take you a level or two higher than you already are.
Right.
So if you're at level 6, whatever that is, then
Yeah.
an editor can help get you to 7 or 8. If you
Sure.
turn in your manuscript to your editor at level 2, they're not
Yeah.
gonna get you to level 8.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
gonna get you to 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So the more work that, and certainly once you've written, 8 books. How many books is it now? 9 for
It's
you?
7 published, but I've written
7?
11 overall.
Okay. So at that point, you start to develop your
Right,
own ability to see, okay, I need to make sure that I've done this and I need to make sure
yeah,
this arc is this way. I mean, you have
right,
this whole, but on the flip side, you're taking on new things like
yeah,
dual POVs and multiple POVs, multiple timelines.
right,
Um, So,
yeah.
yeah, do you have an editor that who you work with before you go to your editor?
I have worked with some editors, for the beginning pages, which I think is very, very important. I'm a big
Yeah.
proponent of working with an editor. I really am. I just think the necessities, if you can do it, the necessities of this business, kind of push you to do that. And I did work with an editor for the beginning pages. I think of both these 2 books.
Okay.
And I also am fortunate that I have some writer friends who I really trust, who I've known for over 10 years.
Of
And I
course.
value their opinion and their experience level to help me. And
Yeah.
that's a hard thing to find. People ask me that all the time when I teach. How do I find a good beta reader? How do I find somebody who can really do that? And my answer is it's hard and it does
It's
take
hard.
time. But there are some great places to find like a beta reader matchup, or during a
Mhm.
class, you click with somebody and you can tell that they're going to get your work, and be able to give you feedback. But that is one of the
Yeah.
hardest things to find. It really is.
What are some of the things that you now know to ask about that maybe a first-time author getting their first deal wouldn't think to ask? "Hey, are you
Yeah.
doing this? Are you doing this?" Or some of those things that are hidden that
Right.
first-time authors don't realize that your publisher's doing for you, but they are.
Right. So things that a lot of people don't know first time out are there are 2 places for readers to find your book, and actually self-published books I think can be at least on one of them. I'm not sure if on the second one, but places called NetGalley
Yeah.
and Edelweiss, and these are 2
Mhm.
online catalog systems where they can put the advanced reader copies, even in audio form, which I didn't
Mhm.
realize actually until this book. And having it accessible on there. NetGalley, the most part is not all influencers, but tends to skew a little bit more, I think, on the influencer based side or early reader side. And Edelweiss is more bookseller side of things. But it's a way for those people to find your books and decide if they want to stock them in their store or give them reads and early reads that can get on Goodreads. And there's
Mhm.
promotion that can be done on those. Your publisher can pay to have you a featured title. They can pay to have you be a read now, which means an instant click and you don't have to be approved by the publisher. And those are paid parts of the
Yeah.
marketing budget, but they can make a big difference. And I know certain things they did for this book that they didn't do for romantic fiction increased those early reads a lot, and they were around some of the paid promotion on those sites.
Well, and it's interesting because from a traditional publisher standpoint, those costs are pretty negligible.
Yeah.
But when you're a self-publishing or an indie publishing
Yes.
author, they're not negligible.
Right. Right. For
Right?
sure.
So,
Yeah.
a lot of people who had commented on this post were saying, "I'm 8 grand in,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be a while before
Yeah.
I'm in the black, like, before
Yeah.
I earn back everything that I put out on this project." And I think to a traditional publisher, 8 grand is not
Right. Right.
a lot,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
when you're self-funding, yes, you're making more off the back end because your
Right.
royalties are higher, but that's still coming out of your own personal
Sure.
checking account.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's not an unusual number, I will say, for to
right.
spend regardless of where you are. I mean, a PR companies are expensive, and if you hire a PR company, you're talking 20 and $25,000, and I know people who spend
Right.
that and they didn't even get that in their advance. So I think writers don't understand how much, whether you're traditionally published or self-published, you're putting behind your
Yeah.
marketing. And I've paid money for all of my books to some level, some higher, some lower.
That's what I'm continuing to hear is around the 15 to $25,000 mark if you hire an outside publicist. There's,
Right.
of course, no guarantee to any of that. There are some great,
Right.
publicity people, by the way, and that we can all debate all day whether or not that price is fair, but the fact of the matter is, in most cases, not all, but most, God, fingers crossed, they've made those contacts. That's kind of
Yeah.
also what you're investing in, is the fact that they can reach certain outlets you could not reach on your
Right.
own. So you're using them as your proxy to give you
Yeah.
credibility and to get you a spot, but
Right.
that doesn't mean anything. It's not a guarantee of
No.
anything.
And I mean, I think I've talked to PR people in the past, and a good PR people will say, there's a hook I can work with, or this is going to be harder for me. And I think authors
I hear
need to
you.
understand what publishing is looking, oh, sorry, not what publishing, what media is looking for, even what podcasters are looking for, what influencers are looking for. Certain books are going to hit in those buckets better than others. And you can actually allocate your money, in it in the best way.
Right.
Something publicity is going to be mostly targeting traditional media forms, which are getting smaller and smaller. There still has to be a newsworthy-ish hook for that book to land
Absolutely.
on NPR, or for that book to land, in People Magazine or Vogue or something. There's something that really makes it stand out. And that might be a
Mhm.
different hook than an influencer is looking for. And influencers are
Mhm.
looking for different things. Book Talk is looking for something different. And you can actually put your marketing dollars toward the right thing for your book. And
Yeah.
you can pay for somebody just to do a podcast tour, just to do a book talk tour. And then but you need to understand what books do well in the different markets, in the different media markets, and then allocate your money the best way. And I've talked to people in the past who said, for traditional media, I don't think that has a strong enough hook for me to do it. And the good thing that they said that, right?
Yeah.
And then, but do it this other way. And I
Yeah.
think that's and I will say, for those writing YA isn't great
Mhm.
for that traditional media bucket.
Mhm.
That's not great to spend your publicity dollars on. It's just, you
Right.
don't get the return the way you do in an adult world. So that's
Right.
the example, one of those examples. But this is all why you need to understand the industry a lot more, especially if you're
Mhm.
putting your dollars behind it.
Well, I think too there's this rampant belief of I mean, Oprah doesn't have a show anymore beyond Super Soul Sundays, but it's that whole I need to get on Oprah, or I need to get
Yeah.
on Ellen, which also isn't doesn't have a show
Right.
anymore, or I need to get, I'll often hear, for example, business authors who've written a business book say, "Well, I need to get Gary Vee to endorse it." And the thing about it is that, for example, Gary Vee has a huge audience, but if your book is about, I can't think of a good example right now, but something that Gary Vee's
Right.
audience doesn't
Right.
isn't interested in,
Yeah.
you might as well be speaking to, shouting into the Grand
Exactly.
Canyon, but it's gonna
Yeah.
cost you a pretty penny to get
Right.
access to his audience. So to
Yes.
your point, the idea of it's not just where, like, what's the outlet that you're choosing, it's where are your ideal readers? And I
Right.
think I had this thought over the weekend that there's a difference between sometimes I think in the traditional world, an agent or an editor or both will say, there's not a market for this, or the
Mhm.
market is, it's not that the market is too saturated. It's that they've recently taken on something similar as an
Right.
agent or as an editor. And so they don't want to have
Yep.
two in that same bucket.
Yep.
But this notion of there isn't a market is different from there aren't readers.
Right.
Like, I haven't fully fleshed this out yet, this thought, but, like, there isn't a market is business speak.
Yeah.
Like, the market for this is too small or some such thing. If you're willing to take the time to figure out where you can find readers,
Yeah.
you you're gonna find them. I mean, I just
Right.
spoke a couple of weeks ago with Jennifer Brown, she's written this, oh, I'm gonna forget the name of it right now, but I have to remember because it's just great. The cover looks like Handmaid's Tale, and it's terrific. She's a professor or teacher of medieval history, specifically women, and I'm paraphrasing, so no, what women who do crazy cool things in medieval history. It's like the most niche I
Yeah.
had ever heard of. And she's with a traditional publisher,
Right.
and she's finding the readers who are interested in
Yeah.
this thing. So it's
Right.
like, even if she is with a traditional house, but we're a traditional house to have said, there's no market for this. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
that you can't still, and even if there is, you've still got to find your readers. What's your preferred method for that marketing side so that you don't get burned out, or so that you don't find yourself doing things you don't wanna do, or do you do things you don't wanna do? Like, what how do you attack that?
So this is personality, and I will admit I'm an all or nothing kind of person. So I'm either doing 1,000 things or absolutely nothing. And so I have a hard time only doing like a little bit of something. So if I'm going to
Let me
do it,
just say
I'm
real
doing it.
quick, because it's on my brain, it's The Lost Book of Elizabeth Barton. That's
Okay, great.
Jennifer Brown's book. Otherwise I'm going to forget it, but The
Yeah.
Lost Book of Elizabeth. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So when I take on support of my books, I kind of go whole hog and I'm in. So I'm
Mhm.
pitching everything from traditional big media to podcasts to reaching out to influencers to doing local media outreach to setting up my bookstore events to connecting with other authors to partner with for events to connecting with local book clubs. I mean, I have a spreadsheet and I'm kind of doing it all. And
Yeah.
that's what happens 2 to 3 months before release for me is just all marketing time.
Okay.
And every time I do it, I question if it's worth it, to be honest. And sometimes you get a hit or 2 and you're like, "Okay, but
Yeah.
was that still worth it?" Because I could
Mhm.
have been halfway through writing another book. And that's a choice. And I know many authors who say, I'm not doing that because really is the return going to be there? I'm better off writing the next book that gets a higher level of publisher support because really at the end of the day, they're the ones who make or break almost exclusively if the books that you see and the books that become bestsellers that is the publisher's doing. Like I can't mirror that. But there's a certain
How do
level of
you how do you I wanna ask you about that, because when you say it's the publisher's doing, what do you mean? If they're not doing the marketing, if they're not out pounding the pavement, what do you mean by that exactly?
so if they pay $1 million for a book, they're putting
Yeah,
everything behind it. They are
I
hitting the
got it.
pavement.
Okay.
They are
Mhm.
doing everything. So, there is a level of support that I said like everybody's kind of getting in my experience. But yes, people are getting more for sure. People are getting more. They're
Of
getting sent
course.
to ALA. They're getting sent to Winter Institute. All of these people, they're getting out there in a way that their books are in front of people for sure.
Got it.
I mean, in my experience, and I don't know if this is universal, so I'll just put it out there. I don't think every publisher puts every book up for every opportunity. I know that for sure for conferences like
Yeah.
ALA and all of those kind of things. Even a book club, they might only send a selection of their books to the celebrity book clubs, not every book. So that's kind of what I mean about that. But
Okay.
I'm willing to try because I just have the personality that I'm like, well, this is what I'm doing and I'm going to support the book I wrote. Eve, but I know the odds of getting a big hit that makes it worth it are quite low.
Mhm.
As long as my eyes are wide open, I think, and you put in the work, it just feels good for you personally. And that's
Yeah.
truly a personal decision to make. But my eyes are open about what is the result of this going to be.
Do you first of all, do you only do local events, or do you travel as well to do bookstore events and things like that? And do you, if you travel,
Mix.
mix? If you travel, are you typically funding your travel or
Oh, yes.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
any of the travel, well, I will say some travel, not a bookstore, but like a festival or a
yeah,
conference might give you an honorarium that contributes to your travel. So for the most
okay.
part, sometimes there's that piece of it, which is very nice that they do. Otherwise, it's all on the author. So if I
Yeah,
choose to do an event somewhere and I'm traveling there, for the most part, I'm paying for it. So I
okay.
traveled a little bit more widely with romantic fiction. I'm staying more local with Kiss Mary Kill. Again, just decisions I've made of financially where I want to,
Yeah.
put my dollars.
Do you find that even as a traditionally published author, sometimes doors don't open? I think that in the self-publishing world or the indie world,
Yeah.
there's a fear of, well, if I go to that bookstore and I'm not with Harper or Simon or any of these, they're not gonna want to work with me. And
Yeah.
my feeling or my experience is sometimes even when you're with a traditional house, they look at you sideways. I mean, they're
Yeah.
humans too, and sometimes they have not great days, but have you found that some doors that you would think would open because you're with HarperCollins did not open?
Yes, and I think I found that out with my first book. So like I
Okay.
am like well versed in that. So I
Yeah.
understand that. But I also think
Yeah.
it's everything is so personal and every rejection is so personal and it still is for
Yeah.
me. As thick as my skin is, it's still personal. But I think you can flip it on the other side and say like, okay, you're at a bookstore and people walk in and say, I wrote a book. Like, can you carry it if you're not? Or can I sign it if you're not? And sometimes people don't have the right attitude for it. They don't have the right
Right.
respect for it. They don't go into it the right way. And if you own a bookstore, it's likely this isn't the first author who's walked through your door. I imagine, it's like if you live in LA and there's a celebrity on every street versus you see a
Right.
celebrity in your small town, somewhere else. Like it's different, right? They're used to authors coming in. So you need to
Yeah.
figure out, how do I come in? How do I approach it? How do I appeal to them? And you have to plan it a little bit and understand their viewpoint. You also might be catching them, they're in the middle of stocking a shelf and you walk in.
Yep.
I would say what and some of the things I do beforehand, I will go into bookstores around me and sign stock. And if I travel somewhere, I'll
Yeah.
see if, I'll do that. But I call or email ahead of time to say, here I am. This is my book.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you're carrying it. If you are, I'd love to come in and sign stock. Don't assume they are. Don't walk in the
Right.
door without some previous contact, because they might very well say, this is when our manager is working. Can you come in those hours? And then you have a better chance of having success with what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just walking in the door and any old person you walk up to and start pressuring them about your book. No, it wouldn't be successful in any business. Like, so I think you still have to treat it like a business, no matter what level you're
Well,
at
and
in
like,
terms of
how
how many
can you
books
help
you've
them?
published.
Right. I
Yeah.
have a acquaintance who runs a bookstore in the East Valley of Phoenix, and I
Right.
had a pretty candid conversation with her one evening after a few of us did an event there, and she said, "You would not believe how many authors, and they're local authors typically, but they're also typically indie, I'll just put that out there, but it's happened with traditional too, come in and almost have the I guess, the attitude that they're doing her a favor
Right.
by offering for her to carry their book.
Right.
And then even further and worse is they have an expectation,
Right.
"Hey, and when you agree to carry my incredible book, what kind of marketing are you gonna do for me?" Right? And I think that if we as authors can understand that the more we can help raise the profile, especially of indie bookstores,
Right.
and say they're carrying my book and how, how can I help you as
Right.
the more receptive those owners and managers will be
Right.
to doing that because they only have so much space on the shelves. I mean, we could be
Yes.
talking about a three-story Barnes and Noble, and the fact remains they only have so many spaces on the shelf. And
Right.
so they need those books to move, not just sit
Yeah.
there and gather dust.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you have to understand that,
Yeah.
there's a cost to them for carrying the book and having to deal with it if it doesn't sell. And so I
Yeah.
think like understanding that, understanding a shelf space issue, understanding that they've probably already ordered books for that season and that's been all allocated. Like there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that I think people don't realize. People are buying, my book's coming out in April. The bookstores were placing those orders probably October. So they've
Mhm.
kind of decided what they're going to stock for the spring releases
Right.
6 or 7 months beforehand. Not
Right.
that one or two books is going to completely throw it off, but
No.
think of the grander scale of kind of what's going on, of how the bookstore works. And people don't understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's so much of the industry and our egos get in so much, like, we get very vulnerable about it as
Right.
authors, no matter
Sure.
what else we have going on in our lives. It's challenging to step into this space that we know little to nothing about when we
Right.
first step into it,
Yeah.
and try to move through that space without bulldozing our way through that space. Like,
Right. Right.
it's really like a let's get a feel for how this really works and how it's working today and how it's working differently. I think it's the most lovely space ever still. The
Yeah.
people, the everything, and I've learned to have great respect for the fact that everybody in this is taking a risk of some sort.
Yeah.
Everybody in this is running a business of some sort. And
Right.
if you want to think about it even at a higher level, the people who are getting the seven-figure advances, the pressure on them to sell, this is not just an easy payday, whereas they
Yeah.
used to be expected to do I don't know, 10,000 books in a launch. Now they're expected to do 1,000,000 books in a launch.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
they're out there pounding the pavement just like everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an industry that's based on art, but that it's a business, and there is always going to be conflict there, and I think when you think about authors, not all of them are comfortable being out there and supporting their book or walking up to a
Right.
bookseller to, like, say this, and I think sometimes things become, messy because you're just a little embarrassed or you're a little afraid or it's a little hard for you to go talk to somebody about that.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly understandable. And I
Mhm.
just saw this, forget where it was. Maybe I forget it was on Instagram or something, but somebody said like, just own however you're feeling and how much that disarms everything. So if you walk into a bookstore, maybe you have called ahead, hopefully you've called ahead or done whatever you need to, but you walk in and you just say, you know what? I wrote a book. I'm a little embarrassed to be doing this, but I would really love to talk to you about it and see if you might be interested in carrying it, or if you have it, if I can
Yeah.
just say it. Then you don't have to
Right.
pretend that you're not a little, fearful or embarrassed or, like that this is hard for you. Own how you're feeling and everybody just takes a breath. And I think like that is something, especially as you said, in this industry, we can all relate to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did an event and the bookseller just did not want to introduce me because she was too like public speaking was not her thing, and this wasn't a
Oh,
huge
got it.
crowd, but she's like, "Do you mind if you just do yourself?" And I was like, "Sure." Like, and just tell
Sure.
me you don't like, don't make up some reason, but she was very open about, "I'm just not comfortable public speaking. Would you mind doing it yourself?" Of course,
Mm.
And I think like the more we
Yeah.
understand where somebody's coming from, that's kind of like it's the lesson for the day, right? In all of these aspects, the more you
100%. Right.
understand behind the scenes, the more we can all interact better. But I think here's the problem. There's not enough transparency in the business.
There's
As much
yeah,
as you try to do and a lot of people try to do, there's still just not enough. And that's
there's
unfortunate. It's
not.
really the hard part about the industry.
I mean, there's that old adage, like, don't forget everybody's going through something. And I
Yeah.
think that as much as because it's like the authors are getting frustrated and understandably so, because they want the marketing they want good editing, they want all the things, blah, blah, blah. And on the flip side, the editors are frustrated because they
Yeah.
haven't had a day off in 11
Right.
months. I'm making this up, but right, they
Yeah.
have 7 more books than they can reasonably work on. They feel like
Right.
they're, in some cases, not giving their all or their best to the authors
Yeah.
with whom they're working. The bookstore owners are everyone's exhausted.
Yeah.
So, to your point, if you can go in with honesty about like
Yeah.
human to human,
Right.
I think it allows the other person to receive what you're saying. It's softer.
Yes.
And so
Absolutely.
you end up having this kind of human to human connection instead of it
Right.
being a business conversation where
Right. Right.
it's like numbers and
Yeah.
sterile stuff.
Right. Right.
But yeah, a lot of people have trouble with that,
Yeah.
introducing themselves, even just saying, "I wrote a book. Would
Right.
you be interested, in carrying it?" A
Yeah.
lot of people have trouble with that. I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, and to your point of, everybody, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I've approached now being able to have conversations with my editor and my marketing people with explaining why I'm coming at it from the way I'm coming at it. And like
Yes.
the receptiveness is so different to
Yes.
say like and often times you say like this is what I'm trying and this we know this from editorial a lot, but some people don't still don't feel comfortable telling their editor how they feel about something. But if you say, this is how I feel about it, why I wanted to do it, and you have a conversation that's honest as opposed to like, I don't like that or I don't want to. It's like, this is why this is important to me. This is what I was trying to do. The
Yeah.
language changes the door. And the same way with your marketing or publicity people, you say, I feel like this is a hole, and here are some ideas that we could try to fill that hole. And once they understand what you think the hole is, they say, great, but I would rather fill that hole this way. But you have to just be like
Mhm.
more open and honest and just, explaining it in a way that allows for discussion as opposed to, like you said, barreling in and saying demanding.
Well, and it takes it away from an ego statement because I
Right.
think, like, not to get all whatever about the ego, but, like, when people say and I've certainly been guilty of this in my life, "I just want it this way because I do." Like,
Right.
I just do, right?
Yeah.
From a business standpoint and even from a creative standpoint, someone doesn't really understand why. So if
Yeah.
I'm working on a manuscript as an editor and there's a whole section or a whole chapter on something that doesn't make sense to me, my question is, "Why does this matter?" And I'm
Right.
not challenging them or
Right.
asking them to defend why something matters. I'm literally asking because once they explain it to me and I understand more why that story is integral to the whole, I
Right.
can find a way to try to make it work better than
Right.
it's currently working. And the
Yeah.
same is true, like you said, if you because it makes it more of a partnership.
Sure. Right.
Right? You're saying, "Look, I on my side of this creative coin, as the
Yeah.
author of this book, saw it this way, and
Right.
here's why I think that would work." And it
Yeah.
gives them something to work with, and it gives them a new perspective as well,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's more
Yeah.
collaborative,
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Okay, my favorite last question, which is what is a book that you're either reading now or have read recently, or I've opened this up. Like maybe you read it 10 years ago and you just can't forget about it and you think it needs to be read by more people.
So I will say it's one of my, past 6 months reads,
Okay.
Annie Hartnett's The Road to Tender Hearts, which I
Okay.
don't know if you've read, but
I have not.
it's a fabulous book. Annie writes with a level of humor that I really like. I like books that have some sort of humor, but there's so much depth to the story and to the
Mhm.
characters and to the journey that these characters are on. And she's written it in omniscient really well. And I think omniscient is such a hard point of view to pull off. And she did it masterfully. And I feel like I have such an appreciation for something I know I could not do. And watching her execute it at this high level, I was wildly impressed, but also just enjoyed the whole book.
I wanna get it now for that exact reason. I mean,
Mm.
I was intrigued before that, but there's another book, Lauren Oliver and her first book, What Happened to Lucy Hale. It was a
Okay.
great book. It is a great book. What I appreciated about it so much was the craft of it because
Right.
there's multiple POVs. One of the POV is a collective group. I mean, it's
Mm.
crazy. And so as
Yeah.
I was reading it, I was thinking that, like, this is
Yeah.
a masterful execution of this. And when people
Right.
can do omniscient well, I am mesmerized
Yes.
because
Yes.
I barely understand what it is. And to be consistent
Right.
in omniscient is, I think, incredibly difficult because it's
Right.
easy to slip out of it without
Yes.
even realizing it.
It is such a hard point of view, and,
Yeah.
if it's done well, you don't even notice, and I know this because especially a non-writer, my husband was reading it as well, and we both finished it, and we both enjoyed it, and I said, "Did you recognize that was done in omniscient?" And he said, "What?" And he knows what it is because he's
Oh,
married to a
wow.
writer, and we talk about writing a lot, but he said,
Yeah.
"No, I didn't even
No.
notice," and you shouldn't. It shouldn't be something that you
Right.
actually are conscious of if it
Right.
works really well. And I think often it doesn't work that well. And so it kind of, because you're jumping out of it and you're doing things that, aren't the point of using omniscient. But it's a really hard one to do. It's a really skillful writer who pulls that off really well.
It's like backstory, which I'm learning the hard way right now working on my own book, is if you do backstory well, the reader shouldn't even realize they've gone back and come forward. It shouldn't feel like whiplash. My book, like, people need an extra strong seatbelt right now because, but
Yeah.
once someone has learned how to do that, all of a sudden you realize you just got all these extra details that you didn't
Yeah.
even know you needed, but you definitely needed them, and yet you don't feel like you were taken out of the
Right.
story to get them. It's
Yeah. Yeah, backstory is tricky
Wild.
as well. And backstories, I always like tell my students, and when I try to edit my own work, less is
Yeah.
more. And I think
Yes!
that's where that whiplash can come from. You feel like you know all this about the character and you want to put
Right.
it in, but really the reader needs 10% to get at what you're getting at. And
Like,
then
you can
that's where
sometimes
it feels more seamless and
Yep.
integrated into the scene as opposed to this jarring in and out. Yeah.
Usually, I find you can give enough information in less than 3 sentences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Truly,
Yeah.
like, it can be 1 sentence, like, I remember when my mom da 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 da, or these people always I mean, there are a lot of different examples, but it can be 1 sentence. It does
Yeah.
not need to be in 1974, I walked into my
Right.
house and the clock struck 12, and, like, that's it just
No,
goes
it's
off
yeah.
on a
It's
tangent, which I'm
right.
very good at doing. Um, Thank you so much. I cannot wait to get my hands on the hard copy of this one, and,
Thank you.
I think it would make for a good, series. I'm just saying,
I don't
like,
know,
meaning a
fingers
TV,
crossed.
like, an on-screen series. I think that would be really fun.
It would be great.
Yeah,
Send good vibes out into the universe.
I will do that, I will do that. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. This was great.